Evening. I'd like to call to order the Town Council Committee of the Whole regular meeting for Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. All councilors are present with the exception of Conrad Heed. Calendar and communications. Councilor Baumgartner.
This past week, I attended a City of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission meeting where they approved the coastal management plan and the building plans for the South Yard Assembly building, where they'll be building the newest class of the Ohio replacement submarines. And as you know, it's going to represent thousands of jobs here in Groton, already have, and the surrounding area. And so it's going to certainly represent a boon for economic growth here in Groton. So, on Saturday, I went for a really nice hike at the sheep farm, did the loop there, and I think next week is going to be Trails Day, this upcoming weekend on June 1st, where they're going to, GOSA and Avalonia and the Town Parks and Rec are hosting the crosstown hike. So looking forward to participating in that as well, and hope to see many of you there.
Thank you. Councilor Parker.
I just volunteered with the League of Women Voters to register high school students at New London. We had approximately 50 students register, so it was nice to see young kids stepping up to do it. That's all I have to report.
That's great. Councilor Frank.
I had the beautification committee meeting, and that went well, and that's all I have.
Councilor Overy.
I was with Rachel.
Councilor Atwater.
I attended the Seat Transportation Committee meeting last week. I also went to a CCM seminar on grant writing, which was a disaster, but that's beside the point. And I stopped by the Senior Center for their Active Living Expo. Not that it applies to me, but it was just really interesting how much they had to offer as far as different programs and so forth for seniors.
Great. Councilor Schmidt.
No report.
Councilor Zafari.
At the request of the mayor, I attended the celebration of the Merchant Marine in New London last Wednesday. I was very much impressed by the history of the Merchant Marine and the local history here. More than 15,000 Merchant Marine officers were trained at the Merchant Marine Academy, Officer Training Academy in New London between 1939 and 1945. And the Merchant Marine has had such a strong influence on the course of our history altogether. It was a worthwhile event, and there are some interesting monuments over and back of Fort Trumbull for the Merchant Marine, also worthwhile seeing.
Thank you for attending that on behalf of the council. Councilor Parker, you wanted to add something else?
I also teleconferenced in for the TVCCA because I wanted to make sure I was here on time because of the weather. So I forgot to add that too. Thank you.
Thank you. I attended a presentation as a member of the Pequot Woods Board of Trustees by Professor McBride regarding the history at Pequot Woods and the work he's done there and the artifacts that have been located there. And we will be meeting again to discuss some further issues that we have. A school readiness grant. I signed a school readiness grant that Councilor Atwater works on that committee for us. I think there are 53 full-day slots and 5 school-day slots that will be provided by that grant, so that's pretty amazing. And I just wanted to say that, well, Mr. Berry is here, Mark Berry is here. They added the new class of membership at Shinnecossett. It's an associate member to try to draw in in the mid-20s, that age range. And I was talking to Todd, the pro, and he said last year they had 6 total. And this year to date, they have 24 new already. So it looks like their plan is working well. So thank you for taking care of that. And I wanted to ask Mr. Bird if he could just communicate, since we're talking golf, if he could just give us an update on par 4, please.
Sure. As some of you may know, is the work we're doing, the entranceway work
off of Plant Road into Par 4. As that work was being done, during the demo, the existing deck and concrete slab underneath was ended up being different than what they expected. It was a pile of rubble, pile of boulders, other unsuitable materials, which necessitated an updated plans and then a new building permit from the city. They got that on Friday. Then we had to talk cost increase. It worked that out. We're going to be doing some of the work ourselves, excavating and removing rubble there, materials ourselves. They've got to pull their people off of another job either this Friday or Monday, next Monday, one or the other. They'll start work again on that. And I called Par 4 when I got the update today. I tried calling Peter and Tony, but they weren't in. Peter's supposed to be in tomorrow, so I'll call again tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's it. We're on to item number 4, approval of minutes. Councilor Baumgartner, would you like to move the approval of the minutes, please?
Make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of May 14, 2019. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Baumgartner and seconded by Parker. Is there any discussion on the meeting minutes?
I didn't find anything.
Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor of acceptance of the minutes of May 14th, 2019, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. We are at 8 counselors. Okay, we are on to new business, item 5A. Counselor Parker, please, on page 8.
You have to, do a whole motion or, okay. To recommend a resolution, do we have to do this with the, is this part of the?
This precedes the recess.
Okay.
And then we go to the council meeting. We have to do some parliamentary gymnastics this evening in order to help out a group. The U.S. Groton Sale Foundation has asked us to try to secure a piece of property for the location of the USS Groton Sale. And in order to do that, we need to have a special council meeting. So we are going to be moving this resolution, then we'll be recessing, going to a special council meeting where we will take public comment on the right-of-way. And Mr. Burke wanted to add something.
Just mentioning it'll be a recommendation for the resolution. The resolution will be done in the regular meeting.
I just don't want anybody looking at it, I just want clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
To recommend a resolution to request purchase of the Department of Transportation right-of-way along the Senior Center/Library on Route 117 to serve as the location of the USS Groton Sale and Rudder pending upcoming public comment. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Parker and seconded by Franco. Okay. Give me a minute. All right, so then we will, is there any discussion on this at this point? So Mr. Burt, we should vote on this recommendation of a resolution. So is there any discussion before we vote?
We're just voting to move it forward, but not approving it.
Right, we're voting so that we can move ahead to the special council meeting where we'll hear from the public.
Fine.
No discussion? Okay. So then we will vote on 5A 2019-327, the recommendation of a resolution.
I'm sorry I'm late on this. Because we were in executive session, we discussed most of this. Is there going to be opportunity for us to discuss with the public what exactly is going on?
Yes, we're going to have a presentation when we're in the council meeting.
Thank you.
This is just to get us to the place where we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Last chance. All right, so we're going to vote on 2019-327, purchase of state right-of-way recommendation for a resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. Okay, so it's 6:45, and we are going to recess the COW, the Committee of the Whole, at 6:45. Okay, now we're going to the town council meeting. So everybody has their agenda for the council meeting. That was at the end of your packet. It's a special sheet at the end. Here, you can use this one.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, so, are we all set?
Yep.
Okay. So I will call to order the Town Council special meeting of Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. It is 6:45. All councilors present with the exception of Councilor Heed. So we have 8 councilors, we have a quorum. And we will open public comment, item Roman numeral 2A. Let's see, we should do the presentation first.
Yeah.
So before we go to the public comment, let's ask Mr. Frost, and is Mr. Berry joining him to come up? No?
No.
Mr. Frost, okay. Thank you. If you gentlemen would like to come up, please.
Yes, Phil Vogel. If I might, I'll just go ahead and get started with the presentation, if I might.
Yes. So this is Mr. Vogel of the USS Groton Sail Foundation.
Yes, thank you. We have a lot has happened since we talked to you last a couple of weeks ago, but I did want to first start by saying thank you for having this, allowing us to make this presentation at this public hearing, and also thank you so much for giving us the go-ahead at the last meeting where you commissioned the town manager, John Burt, to see what he could do to get things rolling. And John did a fantastic job in a very short period of time. He was able to get Chris Conley to go ahead and line up a legislative hearing for the appropriate committee for us, and we brought in the Department of Transportation, and so we also had, in addition to Chris Conley, we also had Heather Summers there today. So this morning we had a meeting in Hartford with John and Mark Ofinger and myself, where we went through and got some very good vibrations, if you will, from the legislature to go ahead with this. They gave us several ideas. There were some, it all kind of developed quickly last week, and for a period of time we thought, well, we're going to get appraisals, and then we're going to get, buy the land, and then it said, well, no, maybe we'll lease you the land, and then it rolled back to where maybe we'll be able to buy the land, and so quite a bit happened, and I feel very enthusiastic about the progress that we made just in this last several weeks. And I certainly, like I said, I give a lot of credit to John for getting that all going. And I would like to ask John just to give the public a synopsis, if you will, of what happened and what our next action items will be.
Sure. As Mr. Vogel mentioned, the meeting went very well today. DOT, their biggest concern, Department of Transportation, is that they have final say on the area, the boundary of any property to sell, so any legislation that may go forward would likely be amended with that caveat. Barring that, they're also interested in willing to work with us to sell it directly from the DOT to the town too. They're going to send representatives down to meet with the town just to see the area and make sure would be no obstructions in the right-of-way, that type of thing. So today was just the public hearing on it. I'm not sure when the committee meets again. The committee chair did ask for a copy of tonight's minutes and resolution, so I thought that's pretty promising, but a very positive meeting.
And again, what I'd like to say, just for the public and for the TV purposes, is that what we're trying to do is establish a monument with the USS Groton sail and rudder that will be a memorial to the men, women, and operators of the submarines here in the Groton community, and also would be incorporating the idea that Groton is the submarine capital of the world, and actually this will be the only monument that really will be that we'll be erecting we don't have one right now that actually recognizes Groton as the submarine capital of the world. I know we have the sign on the highway and a few things like that, but this should be. We think this is going to be the cat's meow. So I'd like to ask Chad to please explain to you. He'll go over again what he's talked to you before, but for the public hearing and for the television, I think it'd be helpful if he has a chance to do that.
One moment, please. Mr.
Just real quick, I should mention the reason. Part of the main reason we got away from leasing is they do it in 5-year terms. They don't, you can't invest that kind of money in 5-year term leases. So that's why it has to be more of a sale.
Thank you. And I just, the plan will be visible on screen. Mr. Greeley has the camera trained so that the public will be able to see what you're presenting, Mr. Frost.
Oh, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Chad Frost, landscape architect with Kent Frost Landscape Architecture out of Mystic. So we are pretty excited to be here tonight to talk about how we can bring the USS Groton back to Groton and make it a memorial and a celebration to all those who do design, construct, and sail these pretty awesome boats that none of us really get to see very often up close and personal. So the plan, as you can see in front of you, is to hopefully utilize the right-of-way in front of the library and the senior center. So in the upper left-hand corner of the plan, you can see the right-of-way that we're asking to be released from DOT to the town. It's approximately 1.5 acres. It's about 80 feet wide, and then a couple hundred feet long is the access space that we're looking for. And as you can see, there's plenty of room in there to be able to fit it. And what we'd like to do is make the memorial a life-size replication, if you will, out of an earthen berm that's planted with the sail and the rudder in their approximate locations as they would be in a full-size boat. And so in the right-of-way, we've got an earthen berm starting at the bow, in the plaza where the memorial is going, where we're putting the sail. We have a large plaza there to be able to hold events and photo opportunities, and then interpretive signage all around it to really talk about the history of the operation. We have a long pathway going the length of the boat.
Let me just point to that as you talk.
Okay. So that long lengthway from the sail down to the rudder, with signifying 13 different trees as you go down that pathway, which is the 13 major deployments that the ship was embarked on. And we intentionally made that pathway fairly long and narrow. And we're making the rudder plaza at the end of the ship the family garden, where we celebrate all of the turmoil, if you will, of the families that are behind that go through while the ships are underway, and that they're connected but still distant and apart. And then we circle back with a connection back to the library, and then thanks, Bill. And then within the parking area between the library and the senior center, there's an existing memorial plaza. On that same center green, we're going to be making an additional plaza that celebrates the design and the construction. So we have a whole plaza for design and construction and the celebration. We're using this boat particularly, the USS Groton, but we're trying to celebrate all design and construction of submarines here in Groton in that plaza, and then we go down through the operations, the family, and back up again. So that's a very quick summary of what we're trying to do, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That gives a good overview for the public. Do any councilors have questions regarding this or comments? Councilor Overy.
Thank you for taking the time again tonight. Haven't seen this before. I had asked a question in the past, and I'd like to ask it again. If you could perhaps incorporate in your plans directions to the other sites that we have in the town and city that would coincide with this type of history. And I didn't know what you had planned to be able to do that.
I think excellent point. We did hear that. We definitely want to incorporate it. There will be lots of interpretive signage. All of that is yet to be detailed out as to how and where and what. But I would definitely guarantee within all of those different plazas, that'll be part of the interpretive signage is to go to all the different sites within Groton and celebrate the entire town and its shipbuilding.
I guess you're answering my question, but I'm not feeling terribly comfortable with it. What do you mean interpretive signage that will take you to the others?
So interpretive signage is effectively educational signage, right? So we are going to go back and pull up as much of the history of this boat and other shipbuildings, and we'll make interpretive signage. So when you go to a museum and you see a panel that's got that's what we call interpretive signage.
Uh-huh.
And so one of those panels, or even several of those panels, will be dedicated to telling the history of the rest of Groton and the other sites with some maps and things like that to be able to direct them to those sites. But right now, we very much in the infancy, if you will, of this design. So we don't know where those panels are, what they might look like, but we'll definitely agree to the fact that it should be part of the program of those panels, is that connection to all the other sites in Groton. And that's really what this is about. This is about trying to celebrate all of that shipbuilding and sailing that goes on, in this town that a lot of us don't get to see.
What I'd like to see happen, if it's possible, is I don't really want people to come and see this and go back on the highway. I'd like the directions to take them through our town and then go to Thames Street, the memorial down there, the Nautilus Museum, and so forth. If you take them back out on the highway, you got a very good chance they're just gonna keep right on going. And I'm hoping this will be a highlight to bring people into the whole town.
I think that sounds excellent. I would agree.
We can also have an app for your iPhone or your Android phone.
Could you use the microphone,
that
please?
would reference.
Mr. Vogel, could you use the microphone,
part
please?
Part of the signage, and that way people could download that app and be able to find the different sites that we would like them to see throughout the area.
Okay.
And oh, by the way, Jim Streeter will be coming up to talk to you too. And Jim's one of one of our main guys to sort out the history and come up with the themes.
I don't know, Jim's getting old.
Oh my. So it would be similar to what was developed with the sub-trail, where there was an app that was developed where you could go from submarine to submarine and just kind of view things. That would be something that would be nice here to be incorporated. Councilor Parker.
The Quantic Bridge, I better ask, because I said it wrong last time.
Okay.
It was part of the military. It was housing for EB workers. Am I saying that correctly? So that is a nice tie-in because it's right across the street. So I thought it was a perfect spot because, hey, most of the people that during the time probably building it lived in Pequannock Bridge. So shout out to Pequannock Bridge.
I think another great story to be told in the memorial.
Okay, very good. Do any other councilors have questions for Mr. Vogel or Mr. Frost? Do you have another one? Go ahead. I don't think anybody else has anything at this. Oh, Councilor Baumgartner wanted to go. We'll let him come back to you.
Yep.
Good evening, gentlemen. Now, can you speak to some of the educational programming that potentially could exist in, say, the library? I know obviously the library is home to many visitors throughout the year, and so especially given the kind of new exhibit on local Groton history, how in your eye does this memorial kind of tie into the work that's being done at the library currently?
Great question. I think it could tie in phenomenally well. Ideally, as we go through the research and dig up all the facts that we can to go through that interpretive signage program, we'll hopefully find more stuff than what we can actually use. And some of that will be artifacts or photos that can be displayed interiorly that we shouldn't put outside. And so whether that becomes a permanent display that can go into the library or some sort of that can rotate in and out during times, I think would be a great opportunity. And one of the things we do really like about this site is by the time you get back down to that Rudder Plaza, it's just a straight line right up to the front door of the library, so that connection is very strong. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Andre, what we'll be doing is coming up and developing all the, as we go forward and we get the engineering drawings done and that kind of thing. We'll be also in parallel be doing, and like I say, Jim's going to be a big part of that, Jim Streeter, is developing the themes that we want that are to incorporate just the history, but also the educational ideas. And then I think as time goes by, it's going to be just a wonderful synergy to have it right next to the library and the Senior Citizen Center, because so many programs then can be lined up and given to people with the theme of submarines, or even the theme of submarine construction or design or sailing. I mean, it really should be an interesting thing, and at some point, I would like to see it be able to get tied into the Seaport Museum and have something similar to where the Seaport Museum would, give a little advertisement for this monument as we would for the Seaport. But the synergy is really good, and the Seaport doesn't have that much submarine information, but this monument will provide some of that. But then I could vision a day when you have a room in the library that is dedicated to design, building and operating submarines, and the history of the submarine force.
And are there any pedestrian improvements as part of the memorial project? I know, obviously, because of the kind of the plaza just west of the memorial. You know, there are going to be a lot of folks potentially crossing the driveway there. So,
Yep, so pedestrian improvements along 117 don't change much. There's an existing sidewalk that we'd be modifying slightly, but then pedestrian improvements within the area between the senior center and the library definitely get enhanced. We definitely want to make sure there's safe passage from the Memorial Plaza in the center of the parking lot to then down to the memorial where the sale is, as well as back and forth between the library and the senior center. So yes.
thank you.
Back to Councilor Aubrey and then Councilor Parker.
The only other thing I want to advocate for again, I know you weren't too enthused last time I mentioned it, but I still feel very strongly that we should have some sort of clear fencing on the roadside. I think we can get creative enough to put something up that doesn't take away from what you can see, but gives us a little bit more of a safety situation.
That's a really good point. It's been brought up, and even let's see, one of the representatives brought up, Mike France, you probably know. Mike brought that same point up at the hearing this morning, and one of the things that we've been thinking about is having something like a hedge that would be low enough that it wouldn't impact the visibility of the monument, but would provide an impediment to children or people that might be heading towards the road. So we'll be definitely looking at that. We just haven't really got that part of the design done yet, but we will be doing that. And I think your point's really well, and many people have brought up the same thing, because you do have a lot of traffic down there. As Chad has pointed out in the past, there is traffic light there that slows it down a bit, so it's not quite an expressway at that point, but it still could be a danger.
Thank you, Councilor Parker, and then Councilor Franco.
Oh, go ahead. Are you?
Councilor Franco.
So my question is, where the sale is going to be and the rudder and then the walkway are going to be sunk in, is that correct? So there will be sort of a wall around it, so it won't be just wide open to the road, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, there's a berm that's built around it, so the walkway will be at grade level, but the earth will be bermed up to either side. So yes, there is a wall, there is separation to keep people from just walking straight out towards the street.
Do you have any thoughts of how tall this should be?
Right now, we're thinking somewhere in the 3 to 4 foot range. But again, this is very conceptual, and as we go forward, we'll fully cook all those ideas as to how do we keep people in, how do we make sure it's safe, how do we ensure that kids aren't wandering out of here and towards the street.
Because I was just wondering if it was tall enough that people wouldn't be able to get over it.
Yep.
That might be a solution.
Yep.
Just a thought process.
No, it's a great solution. Yep.
But just from seeing the whole concept, I absolutely love it, and I think it would be a huge asset to that area, and I think the whole thing is wonderful. And the way it's laid out, that is the length of the actual submarine.
That is the full size of the actual submarine, yes.
So I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think it's great. I thought whoever designed it, I think, did a wonderful job. Thank you.
I think
There he is.
Thank you.
Councilor Parker, did you want to speak again?
No, I'm good. Thank you. But,
All right. If there are no other questions, then we'll go to public comment. And the first person to sign up to speak is Bill Vogel. If you could go to the...
Comments.
You're no more comment? Okay, then we'll go to Jim Streeter, followed by Chad Frost. You're good too? Jim Streeter, followed by Mark Offinger.
James Streeter, 64 Pleasant Street, Groton. Madam Mayor, councilors, and town manager. Let me talk to my prepared notes first, and then I'll get into a couple of comments that were made. I come before you tonight to express my support for the resolution supporting Groton submitting a request to the state of Connecticut for the purchase of the right-of-way along Route 117 for the placement of the sale of the USS Groton. As a point of interest, I was looking at some documents today, and in August of 2007, when I was on the council, I referred returning the sale to committee on the council. So it's been a few years, and time sure does fly. As a member of and treasurer of the nonprofit all-volunteer USS Groton Sail Foundation, I can truthfully say that the committee members have, for over 3 years, conducted a thorough and exhaustive search for the most appropriate and visible location to place the sail of the USS Groton to be used as the centerpiece of a memorial to recognize the designers, builders, and operators of our country's submarines. Placement of the sail along Route 117, adjacent to the town senior center and library property, has many positive qualities. Geographically speaking, the location is the center of the town of Groton. The town's facilities at this location, including the library, senior center, and Groton's Veteran Memorial Park, attract many thousands of visitors each year. The addition of the USS Groton Memorial will attract many more visitors to our community. It will not only enhance tourism to our community, but it can also bring some welcome economic development energies to Groton. There is a definite nexus between the underlying purpose of the Veterans Memorial and those who have served in the United States Submarine Service. There are ample parking facilities to accommodate visitors to the new memorial. More importantly, the submarine base and the Electric Boat Corporation have been major economic and community mainstays of Groton for over 100 years. The men and women of the submarine base and EB, as well as their families, have contributed immeasurably to Groton. The town of Groton owes them all a great deal of gratitude for the contributions and service they have provided us. Therefore, it is important to obtain this right-of-way property from the state so we can establish such an important memorial dedicated to the designers, builders, and operators of all submarines. Now for the comments. I have been assigned to do the placards or the educational materials, and that was one thing that we did discuss. We will have a sign that will direct the visitors to the other facilities throughout Groton. I think to answer your question, how do we keep them off the main or the major highways, is that we provide a pamphlet that also not only describes the memorial they just visited, but provide them directions through our community to get to the other locations. And as far as all the historical displays, I'll be working with and coordinate with the Nautilus Museum, Electric Boat, Mystic Seaport, and the submarine base. So I think we should be able to cover most of our community's submarine-related activities. So therefore, I thank you for your time and consideration and hope that we obtain this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. Mark Offinger?
Good evening. Mark Offinger, 201 Broad Street, Groton, Connecticut. First of all, it's very weird to be standing in this particular location. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide some comment tonight. I will give to the town manager a copy of testimony that we had submitted this morning, but I will not take you all through it. A lot of it you have heard in executive session in terms of the history of the boat and so forth and so on. One item I would like to address, and just because it maybe will come up in your deliberations, it actually concerns the why is the right-of-way so wide in this particular location? Because I think that there was information that we presented this morning that I think was news to people, because the history, being the older guy in the room, I remember some of the history. I certainly remember why the right-of-way became that large. And it's called Newtown Road for a reason, because it was built in the 60s. There was no road there. North Road existed further to the north, but this is a fairly new road. When you look at the old aerials, it's not there, just like I-95 wasn't there. But as the council knows, I think the council knows, prior to the formation of the USS Groton Sail Foundation, the town established a site selection committee with both city and town representatives. That committee, and since then, the foundation has looked at over or close to 35 sites throughout the town. And as you know, we pursued acquiring a piece of property at the northern end of Thames Street. We spent around 4 years trying to secure that property in the vicinity of the Flasher Memorial, and ultimately we were not successful in acquiring the property, despite all the good intentions that the committee had, and I believe the property owner had. We were just not able to bring that to a successful conclusion. And so that, towards the end of last year, we started to look at some other sites. The Groton Public Library site has been on the short list of sites almost from day one. It was always one of the preferred locations, but we really never had actively pursued it until we decided that we just could not wait any longer for the Thames Street site to become available. And as previously reported, after numerous meetings, and as Mr. Streeter noted, ultimately the board, with significant input from Chad Frost, saw the wisdom of this site, and that is why we're here today, and that's why we went up to Hartford earlier today. So the parcel, as depicted on the drawing, is on the west side of the roadway, immediately adjacent to the Groton Public Library Senior Center complex. The parcel being requested from DOT, ultimately on behalf of the town, is approximately 70 by 80 feet deep and around 900 feet long. It not only would, and a lot, not that a submarine's 900 feet long, but it's the entire frontage of the town library senior center parcel. It does not include the frontage of the other property on the to the north, which is that open piece of property that the town bought back in the late 80s. So this is just in front of the library itself. It's around 1.5 acres in size. And from my perspective, the width is excessive, and while it's not technically excess right-of-way, functionally it's excess right-of-way. This portion of Route 117, Newtown Road, was laid out and built in the 1960s. At the time, the right-of-way for this portion of the road was acquired to support, potentially support, a proposed Bluff Point connector. Some of you may have heard that term over the years. This connector would have provided direct access via a flyover expressway through the Fort Hill neighborhood to the south, leading to the development of a state park beach facility at Bluff Point. I wasn't here for all that, but from what I've read and from what I know, that concept that people were talking about at the time would have been very similar to what we now know as Rocky Neck State Park. In the very early 70s, Bluff Point was officially designated a permanent coastal reserve, and all efforts to plan, build the so-called connector were abandoned by the legislature and then Governor Meskel. In the early 1980s, a 3-story office building was built at the corner of Route 117 and Route 1, commonly referred to as the DeCesar Bentley Building, and that's just south of the requested parcel. The developer of this building acquired the excess right-of-way from the DOT, which enabled him to build his office building, effectively blocking any future thought of resurrecting the Bluff Point connector. And Chad, I think since our last discussion with the council, Chad has added in the upper left-hand corner kind of a diagram of that area, so you can see where the office building is, and you can see essentially the right-of-way has already been transferred to a private owner at that corner. The proposed new right-of-way boundary would simply extend the right-of-way line that was established when DOT previously transferred the excess right-of-way to the adjacent property to the north. That's our proposal. They may have other thoughts. The requested land would be used to support the installation of the USS Groton Sail Memorial, and it is proposed that the additional property be added to land currently owned by the town of Groton. The town has been maintaining this land as part of the front lawn area of the Groton Public Library Senior Center complex since the mid-1970s, and to a casual observer, it's already owned by the town from the way it looks. We treat it no differently. The town treats it no differently than its holdings. Access to the memorial would be gained via the existing driveway and parking lot serving the Groton Public Library Senior Center and support facilities such as restrooms, additional display space, meeting presentation rooms could be made available at either the library or senior center, or potentially both. The public access or front of the memorial, as Chad Frost noted, would be from the existing parking lot. It would not be from Route 117. It is envisioned that the proposed USS Groton Memorial would also connect to the existing Veterans Memorial, as Mr. Streeter noted. No new curb cut or pull-off area will be requested along Route 117. That's a non-access line anyways from DOT. That's my challenge, isn't it? No. The proposed location would be highly visible, is in the center of town, and within easy access of many of the community facilities, such as the library, senior center, community center, town hall, schools, parks, thereby assuring easy access to visitors and residents alike. I would like to recommend and encourage the council to consider this request favorably. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that is all the citizens who have signed up to comment on this item. Is there anyone else here in the room that would like to speak? Yes, if you could please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record, please.
I am Mary Ellen French, 12 Little Gull Lane, Mystic. Putting something in front of the library there, the lots, both the senior center and the library, are often full already. Putting something else there that may or may not draw tourists is unreasonable to me, I guess I better say. I know it's the USS Groton, but I remember, some of you probably remember, but others of you may not have any idea this ever happened. There was a man who claimed to be an Indian, and he came to the town, and he was going to put up a carving of an Indian. It was going to be free. It wasn't going to cost the town anything. So he made this thing and put it up, and the town spent all kinds of money keeping it from falling down. It was just, I think I read somewhere that this facility is going to be maintained by a group. I would not want to see the town responsible for the maintenance of something like this. You people have done a really great job keeping the taxes where they are. I don't want to see something that's going to be a burden in the future, possibly. I know this is called a submarine capital of the world. I grew up in Groton. My father and my sister and my brother-in-law worked at EB. I think it represents the military-industrial complex, which I don't approve of. I would like to make sure that you look at all of the potential future ramifications of doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment section. And we are on to Roman numeral 3, 2019-327-3, purchase of state right-of-way Groton sale resolution. And we are on Councilor Franco, I believe.
Yes. Resolution to submit request to the state of Connecticut for the purchase of right-of-way along Route 117. Whereas the town of Groton and the city of Groton previously worked together through the USS Groton Sale Foundation to take custody of the sail and rudder of the former USS Groton SSN 694 submarine, and whereas The USS Groton Sail Foundation has, after an exhaustive search, requested that the USS Groton sail and rudder be placed along the approximately 70-foot wide and 930-foot long Connecticut Department of Transportation right-of-way, located adjacent to the town's senior center/library property on Route 117, as the focal point of a larger monument to the USS Groton, the U.S. Navy, Naval Submarine Base, New London, an electric boat, and have additionally requested the town to seek ownership of said land. And whereas the town of Groton does find the requested location of the USS Groton sail and rudder to be appropriate, and further share the desire of supporting our local submarine industry, now therefore be resolved that the town of Groton does request our state legislator to approve the sale of the 70-foot wide by 930-foot long right-of-way along Route 117 east of town, Senior Center Library property, pin 169-808-786-525, consisting of approximately 1.5 acres, and be it further resolved that the town of Groton authorizes the town manager to initiate any needed paperwork with the state and the USS Groton Sail Foundation to effectuate the sale and transfer of the property to the town of Groton, including meeting any other state requirements. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Franco and seconded by Baumgartner. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Councilor Franco.
Since some things were discussed in executive session, I would like some information to be made public that the land sale would actually not be paid for by the town, but actually the Sail Foundation. And also the expenses, or unless they want to come up and speak for themselves.
Did Mr. Burt want to address?
Finish what you're saying, and then I'll comment in a minute.
And then the expenses of maintenance would be hopefully funded by a trust set up by the sale committee or foundation for future issues. And did you want to comment on that part?
Sure. Yeah, the intent of we'd have to have some sort of agreement in place before moving forward with the Sail Foundation as to how maintenance will work, and their intent is to, they need to lock in the new costs for this revised plan from what they had earlier, but they also intend to raise money for maintenance, and that'll be looked at. But then they are paying for any costs along this process. Now, for instance, if it's a legislative process, we'd have to have 2 appraisals, which would be paid for by the foundation. If it's over 10,000, you'd have to have a newspaper noticed hearing. It'd have to go through RTM. Council, of course, has to approve any agreements with the foundation and approve the final purchase or taking possession of it. So there's still some steps to go. This is initiating. So, but yes, no cost to the town, other than my time.
Also, I just want to know, I understand that there might be some influx of people coming to see the sale, but I think a majority of the events would be held on holidays, potentially Veterans Day or Memorial Day or things of that nature. And I think the library is closed at that time, would it not be?
Yeah,
Most of the holidays are possibly a Sunday. And I wanted to make sure that the city representatives who began this process are also going to be on board and working with us in conjunction of the whole process.
There was a letter from Mayor Hedrick that was forwarded to everybody's email, and prominently note the 2 seals at the bottom of the conceptual drawing.
And I also do remember the Indian at the library and the drive-in before that.
Anyone else? Councilor O'Brien.
What Rachel was saying kind of brings to my mind again the fact that if, in fact, these events are happening on holidays and so forth, that you certainly would hope would happen in the future. I think somewheres in that plan, you're going to have to look for an alternate bathroom, because once you have a holiday, you have no place for the visitors to be able to go. So just to put the thought process in there that we're really going to have to come up with an answer for that. Can't really be sending them into the woods.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on 2019-327-3, the purchase of state right-of-way Groton sale resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously with 8 in favor. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the council meeting and return to Cal.
Make a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Perry, seconded by Parker. All those in favor of adjourning the council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? The council meeting is adjourned at 7:25. Okay. And we are coming back into Cal at 7:25. And we are on to item 5B, 2019-204, Esker Point and Palmer Cove Coastal Resilience Project. This is purely informational, so there's no motion that's necessary at this point. And we have with us this evening Mr. Barry, Dr. Welchel, and I think that's it. So we'll give them a moment to come on up and get their things in order. And everyone has a packet that Dr. Welchel passed out. The Esker Point Beach and Palmer Cove Coastal Resilience Planning packet that everyone had at their place. If you gentlemen could just introduce yourselves, please, for the public.
Good evening, Mark Berry, Director of Parks and Recreation. And to my right is Adam Welchel, who is the Director of Science for the Nature Conservancy. In 2018, the Nature Conservancy approached the town of Groton about developing a conceptual plan for Palmer Cove. Palmer Cove is west of Esker Point Beach. It's adjacent to the large parking lot that's across the street from Esker Point Beach, so just as a point of reference. Staff from both the Planning Department and the Parks and Recreation Department met with the Nature Conservancy and Ecopolitan Design to discuss the project. Funding for the conceptual design was secured through a grant by the Nature Conservancy. Ecopolitan Design created a conceptual plan that includes the installation of living shorelines, restoration of riparian and maritime shrub and scrub habitats, installation of pervious pavement in a parking lot, and a stormwater management bioswale. The resulting conservation outcomes, once installed, will help to better manage coastal erosion, increase the quality and quantity of habitat, and maximize stormwater runoff infiltration. Following that, the Nature Conservancy was awarded a grant from the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut, which provides the match for monies from the National Fish and Wildlife National Coastal Reliance Grant. Those two grants combined would pay for final conceptual design, engineering plans, a detailed cost estimate, and a public input process. So at the completion of this, we would have a set of plans and a project that would be ready for installation. At that time, the Nature Conservancy would work with the town to secure funding for the actual construction of this project. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to kind of go over some of the details of this particular project. Thanks, Mark. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, we're very excited to work with the town of Groton. We've been engaged with a regional resilience project, working with 10 towns, including the town of Groton. And we asked some questions to each of the municipalities. What are those projects that you feel would really help to secure and maintain an important asset or public amenity in your community, given the things that we've seen happening with events like Superstorm Sandy and Superstorm Irene, and looking at the impacts of flooding along the coast. And fortunately, we had the great opportunity of
spending some time with Parks and Rec here in the town and going out in the field with Mark and his team and also the planning department here. And they identified this particular project, the Palmer Cove, Esker Point Beach, as a really important asset for the community that is in need of some care and some longer-term thinking about the implications of flooding and erosion. And Mark listed out a number of the different elements of this particular project, and what you have in front of you is the output of a real initial conceptual design. It's really an attempt to listen to folks like Mark and others that utilize that area and think about what are the important aspects that need to be maintained to the future, and then how can we actually enhance it. So as Mark pointed out, you'll notice that there's an attempt to stabilize the shoreline to prevent further erosion, to increase the ability for kayakers and boaters to gain access through the parking lot to Palmer Cove. You'll also notice that there are a lot more pathways put into place to hopefully increase the access and the interest of the general public, residents as well as tourists that come to town of Groton to come and spend some time along the shoreline. There's a habitat restoration component as well, putting in some really important and too often lost types of habitat along the coastline. And then also there's a big emphasis on trying to maintain and infiltrate the runoff from the parking lot so that it gets filtered and cleaned before it actually enters Long Island Sound. So it's got a lot of, I work for a conservation nonprofit called the Nature Conservancy, and it has a lot of the elements of what we look for in a good conservation project. But in this case, it's meeting and melding with public passive recreation and enhancing people's opportunities for grandkids and grandparents to go down and enjoy the coastline here in the town of Groton. So I just wanted to also maybe mention that this type of project doesn't happen very often, and that if we are successful in getting it to implementation, I think, again, this would provide another example of how town of Groton can actually lead and provide examples for whomever is paying attention here in Connecticut and beyond as to what does resilience mean, what does it look like, can I go down and kick the tires and see what it is, and this project would really provide a great example of that. So we're really thrilled to be working with the town of Groton and to have a parks department that's Park and Recreation Department that's paying attention to this stuff and really thinking forward is tremendous. That's a large part of why we're here. So thanks for having us, Mark.
Well, thank you very much. This is very exciting, and you're going to be emailing this presentation, then I can forward it to the Resilience Task Force as well, so they can take a closer look at it. And I'm very interested in if we can get the grant money to do this and follow through, then we can perhaps replicate this in other parts of town if you have a plan that works. Are there any comments or questions? I'm sure Councilor Baumgartner wanted to jump in, but do you want to start and then we'll go to Councilor Franco?
Sure. I saw your
Go ahead.
hands up first. So, but thank you for coming out, and thank you, Mark, for bringing everyone together on this project. I think in many ways this project reflects I think the larger vision of the council. We all, I think, believe in resiliency, but we've all brought our own kind of thoughts and desires for how to make Groton more sustainable and resilient. In many ways, this project very nicely brings everything together. I'm going to ask about a question that I can't solve in large part because I can't read it. It's in very small print, but it's in regards to the infrastructure along the bridge. It does make mention on this
What page are you on?
This is sheet 2. It makes mention of the fact that the bridge is going to be replaced in the coming, at some time, at some point. And I was wondering if you could, it says customize and blank according to deed. And so there are plans to replace the culvert and raise the road. pending funding. It is recommended that they also study the option and value of a self-regulated tide gate to be customized and blank according to deep. So,
You're referring to the bridge on,
The Groton Long Point
On
Road
Groton-
Bridge
the
is
Groton
what I
Long Point
believe he's
Bridge.
referring to.
well, it's inside the dashed area. That's beyond the scope of this particular project. This project is focusing primarily on the two parking lot, or the one parking lot that's across the street from the beach. So it does not include any work with the replacement of the bridge.
so I wasn't sure if maybe as construction of the bridge were to kind of commence, if this project would any way impact what would happen with that bridge, kind of a cause and effect in maybe the.
No, what's noted in that little call out is really the, so as Mark pointed out, the project area that's under consideration in this conceptual design is really that parking lot area, but if you'll notice in the plans, there's a lot of enhancement to recreational pathways. And we wanted to be conscious of other projects that were happening in the vicinity, including the bridge. So the call out is really to indicate that if there are opportunities to improve pedestrian walkway on the bridge, whatever plan that may be in the future, that somehow it's being accounted for in this project and can tie into the recreational walkways that's being improved on the site. But as Mark pointed out, this project's not about the bridge.
No, absolutely. And how did you identify potential sites that could, would be prime for bioswales or rig gardens and better stormwater management practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned we did we gathered up 10 towns together from East Lyme to Stonington up to Norwich, including the town of Groton. And we brought people together and asked them to define what's resilience to you, what does a resilient community look like? And they kept talking about, people want to talk about projects. So we started asking questions, and we've generated a catalog of over 50 high priority projects for the 10 town areas. And this is one project that really stood out amongst that 50 or so as projects that can do three things primarily. One is to reduce risk from flooding, heat, whatever it might be. A second is to improve the public amenity so that people that live there have an improvement to their quality of life. And then the third is really thinking about ecosystems and how do we enhance the environment. So we think about it in terms of a resilient triple bottom line, if you will, risk reduction, public amenity improvement, and then ecosystems. And we use that as a screening tool to identify high priority projects, and this one really rose to the surface. And then the secret sauce is always partnerships and willingness of people to work together, and that really what put this project at the top of the 50.
I'll withhold any further questions.
Councilor
Thank you.
Franco?
Thanks. So I read my packet, and this is the first time I'm actually seeing the pictures, so I'm trying to get a lay of the land here. So the main parking lot, the large one, basically will still be intact. It looks like there might be some new trees planted inside there.
Yes, this is Esco 20, and this is the large parking lot.
Right.
It's probably a little difficult to see, but this lower parking lot is shaded green to reflect the fact that there's a discussion about putting porous pavers in there. So those porous pavers would filter the water before it goes into Palmer's Cove. And it would also, you can actually see it a little better here. You can see, so grass would grow up through the pavers, so you'd almost have, you'd have a natural grass parking lot that would require minimum maintenance, but would, present itself more like a park than just a giant asphalt parking lot. but it's still, people can still park there. It just has more of a park feel to it. And it also filters water coming, shooting off, because the whole parking lot pitches down towards Parliament Cove. So all the water from the parking lot sheets down towards the cove.
Okay. So then there would be more plants out in the water, is that what you're showing there?
Yeah, so that's part of the living shorelines.
Yeah, and again, these are very conceptual. You know, this is really just ideas on paper that are like clay, you know. But yeah, so the idea is to put something along the shoreline, potentially in the water. It's a little bit novel here in the state of Connecticut, so it would require some really close discussions with DEP to really think through the permittability of that particular piece of the project. But again, that's just one component, so if it wasn't feasible or possible, we could find some alternatives. But we're, at least at the initial phases here, suggesting that that might be an appropriate location.
And if you went down to the shoreline, you can see where it's washing away. So
Okay.
the plan is to try to stabilize that in an ecologically friendly manner.
Yeah.
Understood. Do people currently go into the water in that area at all?
Yes, so there is, well, you can't really see it, but there is an existing, there's an existing boat launch right here that people use for canoes and kayaks, and that's used frequently.
It is?
Yes.
Do you have, like rental where you could store kayaks down there?
Not at that site. We
Not at
do
that site?
rent, if you're interested, I can get your bid ready. We do have kayak rentals over at Spicer Park.
Okay. So so the plan is to take out all the asphalt and then
Just on
put
that.
down a type of impervious
Yeah,
material? I mean, this isn't my specialty.
sure.
Can you
I
explain a
think
little bit?
it's probably going to come down partly to numbers. You know, how much is it going to cost? Adam and I were talking just before the meeting, and the cost per square foot for pavers is $18 to $22 a square foot. Installed, where just putting down asphalt was $5 a square foot. So in an ideal world, you know, that whole parking lot would be pavers. We may not be able to do that. That's what, if we're awarded this grant and they're able to do all of the, you know, look at the numbers and go through the whole planning process, it may instead be strips of porous pavement rather than the entire parking lot. But those are the types of things that I'm imagining there would probably be, you know, a couple of options with a couple of different price tags, and there would be a discussion about how much filtration would occur if the entire parking lot was to be pavers versus strips. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
To your previous question, on the front cover, there's a picture that shows the actual access point for the recreation. What you can't see is the erosion that's taking place at the bottom of that slope where the water is. But
Well, I'll
that's
go and look now. Now that you've informed me, I'll go check it out.
yeah.
So as I understand it, the parking lot to the south or on the left, if we're looking at the map, is the one that would be the pervious, and the one on the right would be left as it is, but you would be installing some kind of, I can't remember the term, to catch the runoff from the impervious lot.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Aubry and then Zepari.
Is this going to go, as you look at your drawing here, will it go all along all the shore on that right-hand side of the cove, down to where the restaurant is?
Yes, all the work is taking place on town property. This doesn't involve any private property.
No, I just was wondering if it went all the way, and I guess my second question was, would any of this have any impact on the restaurant?
The restaurant that's closed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I can't imagine that it would. They have their own parking lot. I can't imagine that it would have any impact on that restaurant. And to answer your first question, yes, it would pretty much, work would take place all along the shoreline.
Okay.
It would save it from eroding further.
Yeah.
Yes.
The graphic designer got a little excited with the amount of green that they put in along the edge there. It's really meant to just be on the.
Oh, I see.
Did you have other questions?
Yep.
Councilor Zepari?
You're talking about stabilizing the shoreline in an ecologically friendly manner. What do you mean? What are you going to do to stabilize the shoreline?
Well, the living shoreline concept is designed to, if you were to look at one, and they use them quite extensively in places like Chesapeake Bay, oftentimes they're no more than, they'll look to the lay person like a pile of rocks that's just offshore. They're covered up at the high tide, and at the low tide, they're a little bit exposed above the water level. And the idea is that as the wave approaches the shoreline, it just helps to break it up and deflect the wave energy a little bit.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if there's any sediment in the wave itself, it'll settle out back behind the.
So you're talking about breakwaters?
It's basically like a mini breakwater. Yeah.
Submerged breakwater.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Minor hazard to navigation.
Potentially. Potentially.
But I was just wondering what you're going to do in that. How long a breakwater or how long a system will this be? What part of the point would you cover with this?
There's a lot of different designs. In this particular location, what makes it not ideal but preferable is that it's a low energy area. It's on the larger map that you can see, it's actually the bridge that we discussed earlier actually serves to break up a lot of the wave energy before it gets into Palmer Cove. Nonetheless, there's some scouring that's happening at the actual park itself.
Yeah.
What might be suitable, and again, there needs to be engineering designs done to see what would be the preferable layout. But I could imagine rock piles, probably 3 to 4 feet high, the size of one of these tables. Not contiguous, not a long line, but maybe just 2 or 3 in proximity to the actual boat launch there.
And that's the only place you would put them?
We would be lucky to be able to put things like that in the water, given the permitting environment, yeah.
But you've got all of Esker Point projecting out there.
Yeah.
And that is subject to erosion. And then I'm not sure what is happening at Esker Point Beach. Is there deposits of silt and sand there? What I've been told that it's not a pleasant place to swim.
Mr. Barrett?
We are addressing as best we can the influx of non-native species of black ooze that continually washes up on the shore.
Yeah.
We purchased the surf rake back, I think, last August. And I think when I came before the council a couple of months ago, I think we collected 180 yards of that. I think we're in excess of 200 yards now. So it's an ongoing project. Outside of that non-native seaweed that's coming into shore, it's a decent beach.
One of the things, I wasn't actually thinking about the ooze that has accumulated there. I was thinking of the fact that it's very shallow, even for waders. Am I right?
Yeah, so originally that's not a natural beach. I believe back in the 60s, that was a marsh, and at the time when permitting was less restrictive, the town was able to get the permits to clean that out. and start dumping sand in there. So it's, like I said, it's not a natural beach, so it's probably filled in over time. The town has added sand, and just due to the orientation of the beach and the wave action and the wind, that has moved some of the sand off the shore and down to abutting homeowners in front of their places. We are taking steps to try to address the loss of sand. You know, last year we planted 1,000 beach grass plants along the shoreline, and I believe we're going to continue that process. And when that beach grass fills in, it acts as a natural barrier. The sand kind of gets caught in that sand and prevents it from going out into the water. So we are taking steps to try to mitigate the loss of sand into the adjoining water.
Any chance of dredging some of that out so it would be a better swimming area?
Dredging has been discussed just minorly, not extensively, primarily due to, well, permitting would be one factor, and then the associated cost of doing that. I think if we could get through the permitting, I'm not sure that I'd want to be coming to the council asking for.
Right. Any help, any chance of getting help from the Corps of Engineers? I've seen them out at Block Island.
Yeah. There is dredging going on. There's dredging taking place just around the corner from us. So it does happen. In fact, I owe the gentleman that's kind of overseeing the project a phone call so I could find out from him how extensive the project was and get back to you.
All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the particular project or the status update for this particular project? Back to Councilor Franco.
So if we change that parking lot area into like an impervious surface, is there anything else you can do with that other than a parking lot? Can you play any kind of sports on there if it's sort of a grass, sort of not?
No, I don't think you could play any sports on there. If you took a tumble, boy, that's going to hurt.
All right, just checking to see.
The other improvements are, though, we're looking to add more of a pathway.
A walking path?
Yeah, a walking path, and just try to, because right now, there's a narrow strip of land between the edge of the parking lot and the water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, there's some picnic tables there, but it's not really the kind of atmosphere where you'd want to go and sit by the water, enjoy it, because right behind you, you've got this 200-car parking lot. So we're looking to make some enhancements to kind of create more of a park-like feel to that parking lot, but still maintaining the parking function so that that's available for concerts and things like that.
Councilor Oak.
I was just wondering, looking at your sketches on the last page, past the parking area, you have another green area, another light green area, kind of square.
That's the pervious parking area that they were discussing.
I thought it was back here.
Yeah, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about right here.
Oh, that's the current grass area.
The little,
The small light green
kind of
area.
looks like Nevada.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Shape. Well, not really, the shape. Upper left corner, or
Yeah.
south.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, so that would be, your eyesight might better than, so if you, so
Trust me,
there's a
mine's not
specific
good.
call-outs that will actually identify exactly what's gonna happen there. My recollection is that that's gonna actually be part of a, you'll notice that there's a path that goes, right now there's kind of a path that goes out and it stops. And so part of what Mark was talking about, kind of making it more of a park and more of an experience, you'll notice that there's a loop in the trail there, And so that green area would become a focal point for the actual walking trail. And we would look to put in coastal maritime meadows and things of that nature that are a habitat that we don't have a lot left of in the state of Connecticut. But it would be kind of an attempt to provide people with someplace to go, not just the end and back, and kind of provide a loop, and also use that as a way to enhance the habitat there versus a lawn, which it is currently.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we appreciate the update. Sounds like a very interesting project, and I am seeing no further questions. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Thank you. All right. We're on to item 5C. 2019-360 Financial Assistant 1 Position Tax Division. And again, this is no formal action. They're just looking for the concurrence of the council. Would we like a 5-minute recess, or?
Yeah.
Make a motion for a 5-minute recess?
So we don't need a motion. We're good. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. We're back from recess at 8:05, and we are on 2019-360 Financial Assistant 1 position. Again, no formal action, just concurrence from the council. Director Landry, please.
I'm here tonight to ask for authorize the filling of a position in the tax office. We had a recent hire who has submitted their resignation, and this division is going to be heading very shortly into their busy time of the year. And if I have a vacant FA1 in that position, it will significantly impact the workflow and getting that money in the bank.
Do we have questions for Director Landry? So there's no change to the position, it's just
filling a vacancy.
Councilor Zapper?
You said, is there a change in the description, the job description?
No.
And there's no change in the salary?
No.
You just got to keep this.
Just needs to fill it.
It's a complicated department.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just doesn't work out.
If we don't fill that, would there be a chance that I could get away without paying my taxes this year?
Absolutely not. Sorry. Now, if you'd filled it.
So it doesn't look like there's any dissension, so we're all in concurrence to go ahead and fill this position, correct? Correct, very good. All right, so that takes us to 5D, 2019-370 Deputy Tax Collector position. On page 12, again, no formal action, just concurrence of the council. Director Landry.
Yes, the deputy tax collector has taken a position as a tax collector in another town in Clinton. So now I'm asking permission or authorization to fill the deputy collector. And this is the position that does a lot of what we call the back office work. She does a lot of the balancing, counts down the drawers. She also works with answering questions for the taxpayers, but primarily she does a lot of the admin work that's in the background that would have to fall to the tax collector herself.
Very good. Are there questions regarding this position or filling this vacancy? Okay. So, Councilor Lee?
I don't want to put you on the spot tonight, but I think maybe sometime we need to talk about what we could do differently so that maybe we're keeping some of these people if they're good to keep.
And the tax office kind of goes in cycles. We had a period of time where we had a lot of long-term employees in that division. We had a couple of retirements. We had some staff that left the area. One of them took another job as a collector. It just seems to be the cycle. But it is a difficult department to work in. I mean, the taxes are very, very complicated. And it's not only the taxes, it's the sewer use and the landfill. But we have been very fortunate and had a lot of long-term employees in there. When the deputy tax collector is leaving here for a job that's much closer to her home. So you can't really falter for that.
Get rid of the sewer use tax.
Is there any more discussion on this item? If not, I think we're all in agreement that this position should be filled.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
I believe, are you staying for the purchasing manual as well?
I am.
Okay, so we're on 5E, 2019-371 approval of purchasing manual on page 14. I believe we're on Councilor Obrey.
Thank you. Motion to recommend the resolution to approve the purchasing manual as revised, subject to provisions of the Connecticut General Statutes, CGS. I so move.
Second?
Moved by Aubrey and seconded by Baumgartner.
And tonight joining me, I have Eileen Cardillo, who is the purchasing agent, and she was instrumental in doing a lot of these revisions. So the referral that I've given you is, most of them are just like procedural. They just want to bring it hasn't been updated since 2013. We wanted to bring it up to date to what our current procedures are. And if you recall, recently we had come to the council and asked approval for the uniform guidance procurements. And part of the requirements to that is that it become incorporated into the purchasing manual. And that time we said that we would be coming to you with a revision to the purchasing manual to incorporate that. And we've also added a local vendor preference as an appendix. So what I've tried to do is just give you a snapshot of those areas that we updated. And again, mainly they're just procedural changes and some increases to dollar levels because we want to be implementing a P card or a purchasing card program.
Thank you. Mr. Burt.
I just want to make sure everyone's got the yellow copy. There no change from the packet, but the highlighting didn't come out in the packet, so I passed out a copy.
And as far as the local vendor preference, there was some concern about staff being able to manage it, and you've worked with all the pertinent people and found a solution that will work?
Yeah, the one thing that Gary asked is could we make it not effective for 60 days so we can change our boilerplate language and all that? That was the only concern at this point.
But everything else is acceptable to the people it's going to impact the most. Great. Councilor Atwater.
I seem to recall when we discussed this before that I don't remember an agreement on putting in a local vendor preference. Is this?
This is the draft. I was asked to bring a draft.
It's a draft, so we can discuss it and decide yea or nay.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like it was going to be automatically in here. And I'd like to comment that when we discussed it before, it seemed as though my memory is correct, which may not be, that there was one time in 18 months where this would have come into play. It puts a much stronger burden on the purchasing office as well as Public Works and so forth. And I guess my feeling is, as Councilor Zapiria said many times, that our obligation here is for the town in general to keep costs down. And it seems like we're adding an added burden of expense and so forth to accommodate maybe one or two people in a year and a half, 2 years. And I just don't see the benefit. I understand shop local and so forth. I totally agree with that. But to make it a requirement to go through all of these steps to find out that once in 18 months you might benefit somebody. It doesn't say you will. You might. So I guess I would like to make a motion that we scratch Appendix A from the purchasing agreement.
I hear no second.
Oh, second.
Second?
Excuse me.
Well, I was gonna say, I thought you were
I'm
seconding it.
against you.
Oh,
Yeah, I would have.
Motion to strike Appendix A.
I guess I've spoken my piece on it, Mayor, so you don't have to ask me why.
And Councilor Franco, did you want to speak on it since you seconded?
I have a bunch of questions to ask about the whole purchasing manual from the notes I took last night after reading it. I mean, I can ask you questions of those natures. So one of my questions on page 15, it says vendor favoritism and acceptance of personal or town gifts from vendors attempting to influence purchasing decisions will not be tolerated. The penalty for accepting personal gifts to influence. And it goes on and it says including termination. But we just passed, I thought, an ethics board, and I think that this is what they would be referred to. So they wouldn't just be terminated or immediate termination as it states in this paragraph. They would be referred to an ethics board, wouldn't they, for? Well,
it depends. I mean, you still have to follow all the union contracts and everything else. This falls in line with the ethics ordinance. It doesn't go around it. But yeah, if you were found to do something, you could be turned into the ethics.
Right,
So you could also just be found to have done it, and especially if it's something really severe, you could go through the, non-union could go through that process, union could go through their process depending on the contract.
So my question is, but shouldn't the ethics, you might be referred to the Ethics Commission, be notated in that part for vendor favoritism?
Well, that's more of an outside complaint thing. We wouldn't typically internally through reference to the Ethics Commission.
So if a staff employee accepts
Right.
personal or town gifts.
Because what you can't do is overrule supervisor authority. So if your employee did something wrong, you take action. It doesn't go through an ethics commission. That's really for people who think there's something going on from the outside, and they fill out the form and ask us to look at it.
So you have to go through the normal chain of
Yeah.
command as far as
So if you're-
supervisors and reprimanding.
So you're saying to me, if somebody in staff finds this out, then it goes to the management. But if somebody on the outside, like a citizen, accuses, then
There's a complaint form, and then depending on what it is, again, first thing is we go to HR too.
So because I do recall, maybe I'm incorrect, but I thought it was things of taking gifts over $100, and
That's one of the
$100
things.
was specifically stated in there.
Right.
And this is also stating the same thing of accepting gifts from vendors. So I'm just thinking that there's an issue there.
Well,
So-
part of what we discussed with the ethics ordinance is it's really for people not covered by other existing rules. So like including making a notation for if a council member did something inappropriate, that type of thing. It's for people who don't already have another avenue. Because you can't override those other avenues.
Okay. Also, it said in there, I'm just checking on page 18 where it states purchasing agreements and things of that nature. And I've also notated on, I think it was page 22, that there was,
Excuse me. Could you reference the section, because our pages
Yeah.
are not numbered
okay,
like
so
yours.
first it's just page 18 in general.
But it's 3.5A.
Oh,
It starts with 3.5A, and there's a chart at the top that has less than or equal to $1,000.
okay.
That's our page 18.
I'm sorry. And then I'm on, I guess, the appendix A.
Motion on the floor to scratch this.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Is the motion on the floor to scratch Appendix A?
Yes,
Are we discussing that motion, or are we discussing other parts
she's
of it?
discussing other things as well.
Because it's just scratch A along with the whole, didn't we make the motion now on scratching A? Is it just to scratch A that we're dealing with, or are we not dealing with the whole thing altogether?
Probably ought to finish A.
I had called on you because you had seconded Counselor Atwater's motion to discuss scratching Appendix A. And you've gone off on other things, so.
Well, that's what I said I was going to do.
Perhaps we could bring it back.
I said I wasn't really, had nothing
So do you
prepared,
have
but I had
anything else on
questions.
Appendix A at this point?
In section Appendix A, it says businesses that are on the state of Connecticut or federal disembarment list will not be eligible to bid. Do you do that for all purchasing?
Yes, that's part of our procedures.
So that's a normal procedure to do regardless. Let me ask you, if there was a local, like, any type of vendor, let's say, and they did work for the town and it was not up to par, and would they be considered a vendor that we would use again?
Only if they remedy the situation.
So if we had a local vendor who came in to be, a low bidder, but we found that his previous work wasn't so up to snuff, let's say, would we use him again just because he's the lowest bidder?
No.
So there is something that is
Yes.
in place for that.
We do document if there are issues with vendors for future reference.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Zapari?
Appendix A appears to me as preference for a local vendor. And this is something that came up previously when we had a bid from a local vendor that was $1 above the low bidder. And the low bidder was from out of town. And it seemed to me that it is not beneficial to the town for us to be spending our money outside the town. The local vendor is someone who pays taxes in the town, to the town, and I think we owe some loyalty back to them. And this particular clause, Appendix A, seems to be a response to that concern that I think we all shared at the time this was going down previously. And so I think that Appendix A is serving the purpose of giving preference to local businesses, providing they get a chance to, and it's very clear in this appendix, if they bid within 5% of the local bid, the lowest bidder, they get a chance to rebid and get down to be the low bidder. I think that's in the best interest of the people in the town. Those local bidders employ local people. All of this, we're contributing to the local economy by giving preferential treatment to local bidder. But at the same time, we're not letting them run away with the farm. You've got a 5% limit on when they're, if they exceed the low bidder by more than 5%, they don't get the job. I mean, they don't get to rebid. But this does produce a return to the local economy and to the people that pay the local bills. And I think it's fair. I think that what you put in here in Appendix A is a good thing, and it meets the purposes that we espoused earlier.
Councilor Parker?
Just for clarification purposes, when they all bid, they do not know what each other's bidding. So we would have to inform the local vendor that his bid needs to be changed, correct?
Correct.
When we do that, do we let the other vendors know that we're talking to our local vendor? How's that work? Is there any conflict to have?
There would be language in the bid terms and conditions notifying all participants that we have a policy that would allow for local vendor preference. So they would know when they entered into the bid that could happen.
Okay, one more question. Did we have that language in there previously? So
No.
we have nothing when they
We
bid,
didn't.
we never said, hey, we may choose a local vendor, even though it wasn't in our policy?
No.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilor Aubrey?
Joe is correct. This is exactly what we asked for. I was very upset when we had a Groton firm lose a bid for $1. And I had asked at that time if we could look into doing just exactly what you've done, and I appreciate that very much. I thought that brought to light the fact that it was just a ludicrous situation that had to be corrected, and I think this will correct it. You know, if we find out we've made some terrible mistake, well, then we'll look at it. But
We can
you know,
correct that.
if you live here, you pay taxes, you've got a business, we want to try to make it so that it's a reciprocal relationship. So I think this is excellent.
And there are several safeguards built in to Appendix A as far as the implementation, as far as verification, making sure there are no delinquent taxes, and then the very last section, or second to last, Section 4, talks about assuming that all other conditions have been met, internal process to review bids was satisfactorily completed. So there are safeguards built into this. So I'm comfortable keeping Appendix A in.
May I?
See if anybody else hasn't spoken yet. Councilor Schmidt or Councilor Baumgartner, did either of you wish to speak on this?
It just
Councilor
seems
Schmidt?
to me that it is what we're trying to do, and it's good that we're able to accomplish that.
Councilor Baumgartner, no. So then back to Councilor Atwater and then Rebecca.
I don't think people are understanding the point of what I'm trying to say is that it's wonderful and it's fine, and it's great that we're holding hands and helping these people, but at the cost. I mean, every single contract that goes out now, you've got to have all this separate wording, you've got to have all this review, you've got to have tracking afterwards. You're talking about bringing tax dollars back to the town by having a local vendor, but if all of us are paying more, then we're not really saving anything. It's not a question in my mind of being a nice or a good thing to do, because I do think shopping local and so forth makes sense. But when you add that cost on top of it, it just doesn't seem to make any sense at all. And that's my point. It's the cost of doing this as opposed to supposedly the economic benefit and the good feeling that you're going to get from it. So just to be clear on that.
Councilor Franco and then Aubrey.
So what kind of impact do you think this will have on you? And how many local bidders are there that you would deal with this type of situation?
Well, when I had done the research previously, out of 39 bids over, I believe it was a period of 18 months, there was one local vendor that participated. We publicly bid a lot of commodities that there were no local vendors in Groton that participate in them. Chemicals for the, water pollution control facility. So
The outfitting for the police cars.
yeah, we do contract bidding with those. So that's not included in this local vendor.
Sorry, Mr. Burke.
Keep in mind that Public Works does their own bidding also for construction projects.
Well, how much do you think this would impact them?
I don't think terribly from what I've seen. I've had a lot of discussion with Gary, and he didn't scream and yell, so he just asked for 60 days. We did a lot of working on the language here, a lot of back and forth.
So if we change this language, it really wouldn't impact you too much, you're saying?
Well, it's not that it won't impact my department. There's still, the administration of the program and vetting the local vendors if we do get participants in these bids. So yes, there is an impact to my department.
So you've had one local vendor basically in the last 18 months out of the 39 contracts that you've bid.
Yes.
So to implement this, do you think it's even cost effective from your viewpoint?
I mean, it's a matter of adding language to my bid document. And then if there are any participants, then following an analysis of all the bids to determine if that one local vendor, or maybe more than one if there are, if they qualify, and then doing the next step would be the notification and seeing if they're willing to come down in price and match a bid. So it's more an administrative issue. I don't know if it's really worth it because, I can't see that we have all these Groton participants now that it would highly impact or hinder the department.
So, Mr. Burt, do you believe this would impact Public Works much greater?
I think they'd be a little more work because some of their bids are more complicated if you did have something fall within the range. But we did spend a lot of time back and forth with Gary and I going over the language to try to make sure his concerns were alleviated.
All right.
But I think it'd have probably more impact on them than on the purchasing department.
All right. So I just want to make a statement that the council basically, if people were so concerned about business, workforce, and people in the local and keeping our money here, maybe you should have voted on a PLA for the schools, or maybe you should have kept, instead of 3% for the local workforce to work on these schools, you should have made it higher if these were really concerns of trying to keep money within our community. So that's just my point, but I'm all for local vendors participating in this.
Councilor Baumgartner, and then back to Aubrey.
Could you speak to some of the differences? Speak to some of the differences between a contract and just a purchase order. You had mentioned a police car, how that would fall under kind of a contract as
Well,
opposed to?
a purchase order is a contract. It's a contract between the town and a vendor, whereas there are cooperative procurement contracts or agreements out there that we piggyback off. So we purchase police vehicles that way. So we buy them, it's already gone out to bid, it's usually through the state or another cooperative that we are allowed to piggyback off. So it's preferred pricing.
And those would be exempt from this, correct?
Correct. As well as federal grants.
Right.
Yeah.
And what has your largest challenge been as a department over the last year? I know you had mentioned purchasing a lot of commodities, and I think given the tariffs over the last year and a half or so, they've kind of gone up and down quite a bit in many ways. Could you speak to?
Well, we haven't had any particular challenges that have been adverse to my department. We're entering into a lot of our busy time of year, as well as the middle school now there's a lot of bidding going on. There's going to be a lot of purchase orders coming through my department, so causing a lot more work because of that.
Councilor Aubrey.
Well, I just wanted to mention that we're not known as a manufacturing town. We build submarines. And there are a few things that we make in Groton, but we don't make a lot in Groton. So what we're really talking about is construction projects. And I think the construction projects should have the opportunities that are in this. And because of that, I feel quite strongly. And I hope that we can see our way to put this together as we go forward. It was something that I felt strongly about when we ran into the problem of a dollar keeping a local contractor from getting a bid. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. But I was told then that that was the policy, we had to live by the policy. Common sense went out the window. So now maybe this can bring common sense back in. And if I understand correctly, I'm not putting down what you do at all, so don't misunderstand me, but you're kind of a pass-through. The different departments tell you what they need. Do you actually order it, or do they just put a chit in saying this is what we need?
We actually place the orders.
You place the order?
Yes.
Okay, but other people make the recommendations as to what they need?
They tell us what they're looking for, and we determine what vendors to go to.
Okay. Now, when do you determine that it's going to go to more than one? I mean, do you have some things that come through that it's just so logical to go with this particular person because their pricing is more reasonable than other companies?
Well, we're always looking at pricing.
Yeah.
To see what the best deal is for the town, the best product at the best price.
Right.
And we do use a lot of local vendors. Anybody that's in town, we certainly utilize right now. Johnson's Hardware, some of the nurseries, Sherwin-Williams Paint is a local vendor in town. We utilize many, local Connecticut vendors, maybe not exactly in Groton. There are some in Groton, but definitely Connecticut vendors. Home Depot, Walmart, usually go out of state for many things.
So when somebody wants toilet paper and it comes to you, which I'm sure is probably a pretty big order, do you put that out or do you research what's the better way to go?
Actually, an item like that is managed by a custodial contract supplier. They actually bring us the toilet paper and the soap and all those items. That's been negotiated with them.
But maybe like using a copy paper.
Yep, copy paper. There's a state contract with W.B. Mason that we utilize for all the office supplies. So copy paper, pens, pads.
So most of the things that are not bid, we would look to the state contracts to see who's low bidder on the state contract, and that's where we would purchase from.
I see.
But these would be, this more is for bid items.
Right, right.
More
Yeah,
larger
I
ticket.
understand that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand a little bit more about how the process goes. I don't want your job.
Counselor Zepari, and then I believe everyone's spoken at least
As far as
once.
Appendix A is concerned, you've had only one instance in 18 months where the low bidder would have, would have applied, Appendix A would have applied to. That was the $1 case, is that right?
No, that was a public works bid.
Yeah, it was a public works case, but as I recall, it was a $1 difference in the bid. And the local bidder bid $1 above the out-of-towner who got the contract. Now, if you only had one in 18 months, and you don't have another one for another 18 months, will Appendix A affect your costs or your efforts in any way? It only becomes active when you have an in-town contractor or an in-town vendor who's making a bid that's within 5% of the low bid, is that right?
Correct.
So you wouldn't have to vet anybody. You wouldn't have any additional work to do for all the times that there is not a local bidder within the 5%. Okay. The point I'm making, the point I'm trying to make is this is not going to make a big difference to the efforts of the town and your department. But the fact that we are making a statement that we support the people who work in Groton, and we want to give preferential treatment to the people who work in Groton and the people who do their business in Groton, the people who pay taxes in Groton, and we're making that statement is an invitation to other contractors to move into Groton in a small way. But it's just the fact that the council is supporting this kind of effort for them, I think is a good sign that we can put out that we want business in Groton.
Okay, everyone has spoken multiple times. If you have something new to add, please.
I do.
Thank you.
Question, this would not increase any administrative activities, having this appendix in your office?
I believe she's answered that already.
Unless the volume went up on our number of bids and the number of Groton-based vendors, then that would definitely.
And
Okay.
My last question, please.
Yeah.
Is that there seems to be some concern over the fact that it was $1. So what happens when a contract comes in that's 5.001% rather than 5%? Are we going to go through this all over again?
Counselor Parker?
How do you vet the businesses? What do you do? What extra step, if it's a local business and you've never bought before, is that where we're going with this? What do you do to vet them?
You would check references. That's one of the first things. They'd have to have the proper insurance. Many vendors don't qualify in that respect. You know, they say that they have insurance, but when you tell them what our requirements are, it's back and forth. They don't have enough, or they don't have additional insured or waiver of subrogation. So, and then they're disqualified because of that reason too. So you'd have to qualify them by checking references and making sure they can do the job.
Okay, everyone has spoken multiple times on this, so I'm going to call for a vote on the motion to strike Appendix A as moved by Atwater and seconded by Franco. All those in favor of striking Appendix A, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Abstentions? So 1 in favor, Atwater, 6 opposed, Zepari, Schmidt, Aubrey, Granatowski, Franco, Baumgardner, 1 abstention, Parker. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just have to record it. Okay, so that motion fails. So now we're back to the main motion. which is to recommend the resolution to approve the purchasing manual as revised, subject to provisions of the Connecticut General Statutes. Is there further discussion on the rest of the purchasing manual? Counselor Franco.
So, as I had mentioned earlier, so in the requirements, when you put out something to bid, you're checking the state and federal disbarment list. And this is regardless if they were local or not.
Are you back on the page that has 3.5.A?
Yes.
Thank you.
As I read this, I didn't see that in there. I'm all set for now.
Did you ask a question?
I said I'm all set for now.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on 2019-371, approval of purchasing manual. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? So that was 7 in favor, 1 opposed. Atwater? 0 abstentions. That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to 2019-326, update on excess property redevelopment. This is on page 31. And we have a motion. Councilor Atwater, would you please read this? Thank you.
I make a motion for executive session. I hereby move that the members of the Town Council Committee of the Whole, Town Manager John Burt, Manager of Economic and Community Development Paige Pronk, Planning and Development Services Director John Reiner, Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services Deb Jones, Assistant Town Manager Bob Zagami, go into executive session pursuant to General Statute Section 1-200(6)(b), for the purpose of discussing the lease, sale, or purchase of real estate concerning the Mystic Education Center, 517 and 529 Gold Star Highway, and other former school properties being considered for redevelopment. I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Atwater, seconded by Franco. All those in favor of going into executive session as per the motion read by Councilor Atwater, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. We're in executive session at 8:43. Thank you. We are out of executive session at 9:38, and that concludes our agenda items. Is there any other business?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Schmidt to adjourn, seconded by Parker. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. We are adjourned at 9:39. Thank you very much.